I call the Honourable Marianne Street.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to speak to Clause 1, which is the title of this piece of legislation. It is called the Social Housing Reform (Housing Restructuring and Tenancy Matters Amendment) Bill. It could more properly be called the Strip Back Housing New Zealand Bill, because that is what it does. It takes income-related rent subsidies and moves them in a very small, with a very small quantum of money across to the third sector, across to the civil society organisations who are committed to social housing. It moves the needs assessment process from Housing New Zealand to the Ministry for Social Development. So not only does some money go out of Housing New Zealand and into the third sector, which we would not object to were it not for the full implications of that, which I will make plainer in a moment, but it removes the needs assessment function. So no longer do people who need housing get to go to Housing New Zealand for a needs assessment, to people who have been dealing with housing needs for a very long time. No, they go to the Ministry for Social Development. So what does that leave Housing New Zealand with? Well, under this government, it leaves Housing New Zealand with a diminishing stock of state and social housing, with fewer responsibilities than they had previously, and as a hollow shell of a thing which could easily be run over in future years. Mr. Chairman, this bill could also be called the Distance Government from Responsibility for Social Housing Bill. This is where the government decides it wants to ease itself out of the provision of social housing, ease itself out of the responsibility of providing housing for our most needy, and to further down the track, I dare say, absolve itself of this responsibility altogether. Mr. Chairman, this could also be called Dissolve Housing New Zealand Bill, because this again is the moment when Housing New Zealand ceases to have the mandate it has had for so long. It diminishes that mandate. It doesn't cease to have it in totality, but it ceases to have the extent of the mandate that it had previously. And this is something that we on this side of the House object to profoundly. So the Social Housing Reform, Housing Restructuring and Tenancy Matters Amendment Bill almost could sound anodyne. Unfortunately, it is not. It is anything but. It requires Housing New Zealand to divest itself of some very critical functions that it has had previously. It provides the grounds for reviewable tenancies, in other words, that any tenant in any state house, doesn't matter if they're elderly or disabled or a family with young children, any tenant may have their tenancy reviewed at any time. The Minister predicts there might be 1,000 of those in the first year. I predict that there will be many more reviews than that if this government is re-elected next year and if it is allowed to continue with this despicable policy. This is no more than a government washing its hands over time in a gradual way so that people will not notice, so that only those who are the least able to protest will be the ones who feel the brunt of this policy, and the government will proceed to wash its hands of the responsibility for providing social housing. Mr. Chairman, this bill could also be called Punish the Poor Bill, the Punish the Poor Bill, because it takes away the security that the poor in this country who need the support of the state, not just for a time, but perhaps for quite a long period in their lives, through one reason or another, require the support of the state?
Well, it's a tough call, but I've got to go with the housing spokesperson first. I call the honourable